Before we get started, I want to know how to spell and say your first name. Is it Thyrois?
Oh, that's just do you want to go by that or by my real name?
If people are looking at a list of people I've interviewed, what name would they associate with your physical being?
Taliesin. It's spelled T as in Tom,
Hmm.
Ailiesin.
Taliesin?
Yes, Taliesin.
And your last name is Shrinks?
No, that's just a stage name that I have for Facebook.
What last name would you like me to use?
I don't have a last name. I just go by Taliesin. That's what it says on my social security card. So that must be real.
Okay.
Just the one
That
name.
sounds Greek to me. What's the origin of the names Taliesin?
Oh, it's Welsh.
Oh, well, I was completely wrong. Is there a lot of Talisons in your family?
No, I'm the only one. But I'm of Welsh descent anyway, from California.
Well, welcome to another episode of Fair Folk at Work. My guest today has worked, in a sense, both ends of the fair social spectrum. He's been a Puritan and he worked at Drench a Wench. He also had the courage to do real Shakespeare with his show Upstart Crow. I'm talking, of course, about my good friend Taliesin. Taliesin, welcome to Fair Folk at Work.
Thank you very much.
The first question I always ask on Fair Folk at Work is who was the person to say there's this thing called fair and this is why you should come out and do it?
I cannot remember his name, although I think it was Jeff. I was doing a production at the Morgan Wixon Theater in Santa Monica of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. And he played the player king. I was just one of the players. But he
Mhm.
said, if you like this, there's this place you should check out over in Agura, not far from here, where they do this 16th century Renaissance recreation. It's like Westworld, you're there and everything's supposed to be authentic and accurate. And so I did. And I never got a chance to thank him. I never saw him again, but that was my introduction to Faire. I just showed up on the first day of workshops dressed as what I thought a Puritan might look like, because I heard that that was a good gig because nobody wanted to do it. So, and you get paid and a pass and, parking and the whole camping and everything. And I felt like I had taken my books to class on the first day of class at college. It was ridiculous. Nobody else was dressed up, but I ended up being a Puritan.
Who was the first Puritan you talked to, and what did they say about being a Puritan at Fair or just Fair itself?
I don't remember the name of the woman who got up in front, on first day and said, we're auditioning over here at this time. But she organized the whole thing. She's the one who hired me. I had heard before I went to Fair that if you do Puritan, it's something nobody else wanted to do because everybody else was having a good time. And you had to walk around with a sour face on and disapprove of everything and, wag your fingers and wave the Bible at them and say, naughty, naughty. So and it was a paid gig and had all the perks to it. So right away I was in, I think, St. Boniface was the performers.
You had already a pretty extensive theater background if you know to go for the gig that'll get you paid. What was your theater background before the Fair?
I went to UCLA in theater and English, and I had just done small things before that, but I had been studying Shakespeare. Through my second year, I did Upstart Crow. I figured rather than audition for somebody else's show, I'm just going to do my own. So I did. I got a couple girls and me, like Tony, Orlando, and Don, and we did a half-hour review of different Shakespeare things. They'd come on and do. They had monologues, I had monologues, and then we do stuff all together. But our centerpiece was the wooing from Taming of the Shrew.
You remember the names of the ladies you worked with?
Tracy Marin and Liz Pasha. They were both wenches.
Were you the one who sort of edited and selected the monologues to be done?
They came to me with ideas for things they wanted to do. So I let them do what they wanted pretty much. And then we did some things from Midsummer Night's Dream, short scenes from Taming of the Shrew, and a few others. And it was like in a half an hour, but it was the only show that I saw at Faire that was offering up straight up Shakespeare, that was not like a parody or reduced Shakespeare, which I love.
I am in awe of anybody who attempted straight up Shakespeare, especially given the conditions of Agora. You're competing with quite a bit of distractions.
Oh man, one year we were on Oak Bough stage, which somehow they thought would be a great idea to put a stage right between two roads. So down this road, we've got the Queen's Parade coming, and over here, pipe players coming this way. Yeah, I really learned to project from the diaphragm. That never became a problem after that. To be heard over all that, to do Shakespeare over all that, really took a lot.
Other than trying to be louder than a parade, what other techniques did you employ to attract the attention of the audience?
Well, this was before the advent of the cell phone. Thank God that I didn't have to compete with everybody pulling out their phone. It was bad enough when people would sit down and just start chatting in the middle of a show. So I would just walk over to them and do the show at them. And usually they would stop. Well, once a couple of lovers were standing just over to the side, making out, and they were getting into it so much that I stopped the action because I noticed everybody else in the audience is looking at them. So I stopped and just crossed my arms and watched. And when they finished, we all applauded and they were ecstatic. It was one of those great Faire moments.
So, what was it that kept you coming back to Faire? Was it being an immersive village environment in Elizabethan times, or
Why did I do Faire? Well, I mean, aside from it being a paying acting gig, I would say that to a large degree, I was enchanted with the idea, which I got from that science fiction film Westworld so many years ago, of creating an actual, completely authentic recreation of a certain time period. I think in Westworld it was the Old West, medieval times, and I don't know, Roman times. But here was Renaissance times. So I was meticulous. I made sure that I did not have any anachronisms. I spoke authentic BFA all the time, at least on stage, or not backstage. Got to be a bit tedious, but I always used the language. I loved being part of it. I loved performing. I loved especially improving with people on the street. Yeah.
did you have a set bit that got you good den, or what was your impetus to approach customers?
I didn't really approach customers. I wish I had a dollar for every time someone had their picture taken with me. When I was a Puritan, there were so many things we could do with that. I was approached several times. Once by the guy who was taking around that Leonardo da Vinci style flying contraption. All these people in this little train behind him. Some were supporting him, and I was saying, "Oh well, if man were meant to fly, he'd been born with wings, and this is a sin, and you're all going blah blah blah." And we marched all the way up to Procession Hill. And the guy who was doing the study he hands me this cord with a pull thing on it. And he says, when I get this far down the hill, pull on that. So he gives this little speech. He gets in his machine and he starts to take off, and he gets about that far down the hill. And I pulled that cord, and the whole thing just collapsed on itself. And he was not harmed at all, but it was a great gig. I really enjoyed doing that. But apparently he built it so he could just reassemble it with no problem and do it over and over again. Some of the ale stand owners made a deal with me. They'd give me a cup of mead surreptitiously if for a certain amount of time I would stand in front of their ale stands and admonish people not to buy alcohol and the evils of alcohol and all these biblical references against alcohol. And of course, people would just swarm in there to show me better. Nobody was going to tell them what to do. Being a Puritan was fun, except I could never return all the flirts that I got from women who, were doing everything they could to get me to show some kind of attention towards them. Or one of them would have me read from Song of Solomon, Oh, that was fun.
So you became a challenge in many ways to many of the fairgoers.
Yes, but then I would change costume after my gig was done and then go over to Drenchowinch.
How did you discover employment at Trenchowinch?
Well, at our first day of workshops, Virginia got up and said, "We need people who can kiss. Meet us over there above the washing well at noon." And I went, and the rest is history.
For people who are not familiar with Trenchowinch, could you describe the booth for me?
Well, it was a game. And in the very front were two very large slingshots that was made from actually, I think, bicycle tires. And between the two of them was a cask full of wet sponges. The idea was to take a damp sponge and pull back on the thingy and hit whoever was standing there. We had like a chorus, like 3 rows, 1, 2, 3 for the guys or the girls, and we would take shifts like 1 hour on, 1 hour off. An hour would be the girls, next hour would be the guys, and whoever you hit, you got to kiss, and that was the game. And you got 3 sponges for $1.
How far away was the catapult from the ladies?
I would say it was about 30 feet. I mean, you
Oh,
could never really hurt anybody. They were just these flimsy little sponges, and the person working the bucket with the scooty bag taking the dollars was supposed to see to it that the sponge was well wrung out and not thoroughly wet, which could be a real problem.
was it Virginia who then came up with Trenchowinch?
So far as I know, I think it originated with her. I don't know if she got it from anyone else, but so far as I know, yes.
What was perhaps the highlight of your Trenchowinch career?
There was no one time. It was just the fact of being there and kissing beautiful women that either worked there or came up. And I had been really shy in high school. I had only one girlfriend. I didn't start dating till I was 16. And then suddenly, when I hit Drenchowinch, and I had women pointing at me saying, "I want him," and jumping up and down and screaming and stuff like that, it kind of does something to your head. So I'm hoping that I learned a valuable lesson from it. I certainly enjoyed it, and it was one of the best times of my life.
Let me ask you about that. What do you think was the lesson that you left with from Trenchowinch?
Hmm. Well, I would say be true to the ones you love. Just be faithful.
I'm going to jump around a little bit here. Did you do theatrical things in high school?
Yeah, we did summer musicals twice. We did The Music Man and then My Fair Lady. And then Proposition 13 came along with Howard Jarvis, and they cut all that theater and music programs and all the art stuff, but they kept the football team.
What were your favorite high school roles?
Well, I played Bogart in Play It Again, Sam. So I studied how to do. Studied Rich Little's impression of Bogart. So I'm not actually doing Bogart. I'm doing Rich Little's impression of Bogart. But that was a lot of fun. And then I ended up playing Bogart here a couple of years ago at a function.
And did you draw upon your Rich Little experience?
Yeah, well, by that time I started to watch his stuff directly, so I tried to be a little more accurate. But I do a lot of voices and impressions, and a lot of Looney Tune voices were some of my first impressions. And I love speaking in BFA, and just because I'd read everything Shakespeare wrote, speaking that way came naturally to me.
And so then studying theater at UCLA was the next logical step.
Yeah,
And what did you enjoy about your UCLA times and days?
I used to pass Tim Robbins in the hall back when he was just Tim. Spectacular. Nothing was really spectacular about it.
This is a little bit more of a technical question. I went to UCLA. The theater section at UCLA struck me as very much a method. It was very internal. It was very much about being your character and showing your character and reacting in that character. But it didn't seem to lend itself to necessarily the spontaneity of the fair. And I'm wondering, first of all, if you think that's true, and if it's true, how did you integrate both of those theatrical styles into one.
There was I did not get any improv training at all at UCLA. It was all classical method, Stanislavski, and I just threw those books away because I don't know. I don't need to be told how to pretend. I've been doing it since I was a kid. It's not hard. I basically just it was so immersive being in the Faire experience that you pick up how to be a Faire person from other Faire people, just living there and listening to them and watching how they move and how they dress and how they are. It just I just absorbed it very quickly.
Do you remember watching anybody in particular and saying, "Ooh, I like what they're doing. I should do that too"?
I always admired our Captain Drake. It was just spot on casting. I just thought I would cast him that way too. He just really makes a Marion look good. He had this booming voice. Was that Will Wood?
Yes.
Yes, he had
Or,
swagger. He
yes.
swaggered, even in the presence of Louisa, who had the most majesty I've ever seen in a human being. So quietly and so humbly and so gracefully. He was a perfect foil for her. To see them work together was just amazing. I never aspired to do court, frankly, because it looked like museum pieces, and I don't want to worry about getting a stain on my $1 million velvet as I'm dying of heat.
Um, but before we leave Sir Francis Drake and Louisa, do you have any more observations on that part of life at Fair?
I thought it was interesting how the Spaniards who stormed out in a huff after she knighted him came back the year later as Italians with slight alterations to their costumes and accents. Basically, the same guys. Hey, we're Italian now. They love us here.
There certainly was a lot going on with Louisa as the queen. I'm going to once again jump around. At what point did you tell mom and dad that you were going to be an actor? And what was their reaction?
I think I must have been 16 because before that, I wanted to be a poet. And before that, I wanted to be a philosopher. And I think they were really starting to despair. But I'm sure the second they heard that I wanted to do Shakespeare, they knew I had a future.
What was their occupation?
My stepfather, Dick, was a sheriff's reserve and worked for a telephone company, Continental Telephone. And my mother had the highest security clearance that a civilian could have in the Air Force at Norton Air Force Base in San Bernardino at Aerospace Audiovisual Services.
So they knew that your future was assured in the security of being a Shakespearean actor in Southern California.
Oh, absolutely. The market was just thriving at that time, yes.
What's your favorite role in Shakespeare?
I guess it would be Henry V. Probably the best role I did. Well, it was a Devore after Agura. I played Faustus in the tragedy of Dr. Faustus, which was actually Christopher Marlowe. And I
What
also
made
played,
it your favorite either performance or character?
well, I got damned 3 times a day and got paid for it and a parking permit. But I always came back for a bow. How's that? Damned, but you come back for a bow. As long as I can go with jazz hands, I'm happy.
It's nice when you can define success so simply.
Well, I liked feeding off the glamour of the applause from the audience. It's quite addictive. Nothing quite like it.
When you were in Fair and doing the Upstart Crow, was it pretty much collectively directed and somebody would say, why don't we try this? And then you did that? Or was there somebody's vision that you were implementing?
Wow, a vision. That sounds so highfalutin. I don't know if we had a vision. Basically, I wanted them to each have a monologue or two, and me too. And it was short, it was fast, rapid fire stuff with very little bridge between the pieces, just an introduction of act four, scene three, whatever. And most people went with that. I didn't need a lot of transition. We also did some good stuff in a group in either Midsummer Night's Dream or Taming of the Shrew. I got in a lot of trouble over the Midsummer Night's Dream bit that I did because someone just did not like that scene at all. Hermia is, I think, fawning on Lysander and saying that she's going to take this incredible amount of abuse if he'll just let her follow him, and she hated it.
But getting back to Louisa, did you ever get to interact with her at all?
Was introduced to the Queen in the Court Glade as Marlowe. When they changed Marlowe's, the old Marlowe retired. He passed the torch to me, and she was introducing me. And she had on a purple glove, and she held my hand with such firmness. I just felt so ruled. And she said, I can't remember exactly what she said, but I remember I replied, "I humbly pray it may be so, Your Majesty." And that was it. That was my moment with the Queen. Did you ever see her in her like middle class drag? She was just had this big straw hat and a simple outfit,
Oh,
and you
yes.
walk right by her and not even know. She looks
Yes.
so completely unassuming.
So after Faire, what became your day job?
Which one? I'm an assistant veterinarian, driven an ambulance, jack of all trades, master of none, except Shakespeare.
Have you ever used some sort of street improv or stage instincts in your day-to-day life?
Well, last Thanksgiving, I was at Natural Grocers picking up some superhit incense and some organic catnip. And as I walk out, there's this guy in a turkey costume, just a little downcast. And I went up to him and I said, "What? And give up show business?" And he knew what I meant. We connected right then. He knew exactly what I meant.
And it made his day, I think.
I think so. I think he probably tells that story to this day, if he's
Well,
not still doing.
hopefully he's gotten other jobs since then.
Yes, I hear community theater pays really well. Oh wait,
Perhaps as well as straight up Shakespeare.
yeah, I think I should have really pursued being a ballerina, my first love, because I would have had a better chance. Well, I spent the last 20 years rescuing cats at Bubasta's Cat Sanctuary. We take in the ones with medical problems, the elderly, the orphans, even the ones who just didn't want to be held, the ones that would be least likely to be adopted in a shelter. And I had worked in a high volume kill shelter before that.
I'm going to actually make a semi-serious point and suggest that at Faire you learn to look for empathy in others, and rescuing cats from a kill shelter requires a fairly high degree of empathy that you have to follow through on. Am I reading too much into that?
Well, I'm much more protective and empathetic towards animals than I am towards humans. I have rescued owls, possums, bats, tarantulas, a
Did
lot of
somebody
different.
call you on the tarantula hotline?
No, it was in the middle of the road. There was this time of year on Mount Baldy when all these tarantulas would migrate. I understand they do it here in Colorado too. And this one was in the middle of the road, and I knew it was going to get squished. It was the only road going up and down. So I wanted to move it just to the side so it wouldn't get crushed under a car. And it did this little kung fu pose at me, like, "Oh, you want some of this, huh? Huh? You want some of this?" But I did manage to get it to the side of the road. And one of them I had in the front yard, and I kept it in a little terrarium for a while.
So do you travel with a box in your car so that if you see a tarantula threatening cars, you can mediate the dispute?
Well, I always try to carry a towel in my car in case I need to help with something in the road.
I think I interrupted you when you started talking about Dr. Faustus as sort of your favorite Faire performance as an Elizabethan time character. Are there any others?
Well, I really like doing Upstart Crow at the Agora site because we had 2 shows a day we were able to, and I could have a different show anytime I wanted. We had so many, we had like a playlist. We said we're going to do this and this, and sometimes we wouldn't know what we were going to do till right before. I'd say, let's do Shrew and let's do Midsummer Night's Dream, and then I'll finish with Once More Under the Breach.
How many years did you do Upstart Crow?
I think it was about 3 years. I'm trying to think of which stages we were at. There was Oak Bough. We were up in Witch's Wood. That was a really nice stage. Witch's Wood was really nice because it seemed it was like a little mellower back there in Witch's Wood if you wanted to get away from the hustle and the bustle and the craziness and the trumpets and drums, to just kind of chill a little bit. And it had a really nice vibe to it. In fact, it was similar to Oakbound in that it was built around this big oak tree, so that the oak tree was a big part of the stage. And it seemed like people were quieter back, like you could hear wind chimes back there that you couldn't in the middle of, at main stage. And there were a lot of people telling tarot, fortune, astrology, things like that up there. A lot of psychics. It was more of a magic thing. I liked it. It was a place to, I would go there sometimes to just take a nap, frankly, and I just lay on a bale of hay, and it was so quiet there. And I would go to sleep and then wake up, and nobody had bothered me or taken anything from me.
And the other thing about Faire audiences was that they were good audiences and they were there to have a good time. Well, that's what I thought and found. How about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, everybody, once they've been to Faire and they realize that the purpose of going to Faire is to have fun, then they would figure out how to do that. How are these people having fun? Well, they're dressing up, they're talking in this funny way. I saw people who would come one year as a customer, and either they join up and become part of Faire, or they become lifelong members, and they develop a background for their character and a name for their character, and every piece of everything on their costume has a story behind it.
And that if you asked about their costume or their character in BFA, they would tell you, and you could tell that that was just their and give up show business moment.
It was fun. I really liked interacting and the improving with people who both were at Faire and participants and customers. I really like the interaction, and I don't find that kind of improv going on anywhere except maybe now. I think if I had not gone to Faire, I would have probably gone into cosplay. And it seems to me like Renaissance Fair in a way was Elizabethan cosplay. Yeah, and well, especially for people who have like Celtic and English and British background, this is your ancestry. This is where you came from. And I have Welsh, Irish, Scot, and English all at war in my blood. So it was great to get into it from that point of view and learn the history behind all of it. Was fascinating, the things that were going on, and the way they did it was when I came in, which was like 1982, they called that 1582, and they went by what was going on in court was what had happened in England in 1582, those events, which I couldn't tell you right now, but I had got there just before the Armada, and then they had the Armada, got blown away, and after that, the Spaniards were gone, hello Italians, but it was a huge thing because we were right there at that when that happened in history. It felt like you were living through it again. And I've never seen Americans who should be anti-monarchists, if anybody should be, screaming, God save the Queen. From the bottom of their hearts, God save the Queen. I think under every American is a monarchist just dying to get out, and God save the Queen.
I had forgotten that it was 15, whatever the year it is.
1582 was a weird year for England. Well, that Shakespeare married that year, Anne Hathaway. And it was like 1583 when things started to get weird with Spain. Raleigh was knighted in 1585, which would have been 1985. That was a good year. And they kept up every year with the actual historical events that were occurring in that year only 400 years earlier. And that made up a lot of the main stage show.
Do you remember the gentleman who played Francis Drake's companion / the guy who carried the chest, Mark Lewis?
Yes, Mark Lewis. is a saint in my world.
What
Mark
about Mark Lewis did you notice and appreciate?
Mark Lewis was the shaman for the Renaissance Fair. Nobody called him that, but that's what he was. He was the shaman. He was the storyteller. He was the heart, if any person was, of Renaissance Fair. It was Mark Lewis. He is, for example, of a person who can be as talented as an Olivier and never get an Oscar. And yet his stories have found their way into my subconscious in a huge way, have completely affected and changed my life. I have a copy signed by him of Anna and the Sun. I would go every time I could to storytelling up at Maypole and listen to his stories. And some of them I know almost by heart. I know the story of word pictures by heart.
He was very, very inclusive in his storytelling, and it was stronger for that. And I never knew him personally, but he just exuded a presence of joy in telling these stories, and he included the audience in them.
Yeah, I really like the things he would do for warm up before he actually told his story. Sometimes he would do Spark in the Dark, which where you take a wintergreen lifesaver, you put it at the back of your mouth between your wisdom teeth, and somebody looks in your mouth in the dark, right? And you bite down, and it makes a blue spark in your mouth. And then he would make it rain, like you were saying. He would start out with just flicking your fingers and then patting on your pants, and then it would make it sound like it was a torrential rain coming in, and then he would make it go away. Because before, he said that he had done that one night and then it rained the next day and they blamed him for summoning the rain. But ever after that, he always made sure to dismiss the rain once he had summoned it, make it go away.
And he was also very good as the somewhat slobbering assistant who was very happy to share or not share what was ever in the casket.
Well, your green umbrella at Faire was what you did, your gig. That was what you'd go around Faire doing if you just traveled around doing this on the street. And his was Dirty Jack, he was carrying Sir Francis Drake's treasure around. And of course, beautiful young women would say, "Oh, we want to see what's inside. What's in there? What's in there?" And he'd say, "Well, I'll show you what's inside, but you got to promise not to go ooh and ah." And he'd make them promise, and they'd all promise. And he would put the chest down and open it, and inside is all this, beautiful paste jewelry and gold and bullion and stuff. And they go, "Oh, ooh," and he'd get all angry and slam it shut and go off somewhere else. That was his exit. My favorite improv bit on street has to be the Dear Jane letter. This girl gets a letter from her love. She can't read. She gets it's a breakup letter saying, "I'm going away," da, 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 and she would go up to like a customer and say, "Oh, I cannot write, but my lemon hath sent me this letter saying how much he loves me. Would you tell me what it saith?" And the person, it was interesting, the reactions. Somebody would tell them exactly what it says. Just nope, he's leaving you. You're done. That's it. But some people would lie. They'd say, "Oh, he says that he loves you and he's coming back next week with gold." I
No, I had never heard of that bit before. That's brilliant.
think Tracy did that once. I think she may have been her who told me about it. But usually you had a thing that you would do that would usually give you an improv bit that would take about a minute or so. You could do it, wind it up, and just move on. That was the way you did it in the street. You did not want to red zone a place by doing something that made people around you, that stopped traffic.
Right.
That sounds good. I did see a lot of interaction between the different people who had different gigs. Like I was with Dance Macabre one day just for the fun of it. That was a fun gig to do. The Scholars were a brilliant gig. They would, two guys, I think it was Gerald Zapata and another actor who varied. They would go around as scholars in this scholarly regalia with a huge book. It was actually a phone book bound up in leather, but to them it was the tome. And they would go around, like they wound up one day in front of the washer well, and the washerwomen, one of them got up and posed the question, "Why are snails so slimy?" And they look at each other and say, "Why are snails so slimy?" "We must consult the tome." And they open it and they're pawing through. And one of them, one suggests something to Gerald, and he smacks him. "No, not that." And then they would come, I don't remember their answer for that particular question, but they would come up with an answer, agree on it, and then announce it, and then just move on. They were just founts of knowledge that way. They would take any question. I have to admire that amount of improv.
What other street bits do you remember?
There seemed to be a certain movement among adolescents to like be as gross as you could be. Like there'd be the 13-year-old guys in makeup coming up at who were lepers, and they loved it if you were, if you were mean to them, they just ate that up. Ah, begone, foul leper. Ah.
One of the things I really admired at the fair were the mongers that had like dead animals.
Oh.
I mean, the lady with a plate full of fish in
Oh.
Agora when it's 90 and to,
This fish is bad. Okay, half off.
yeah,
Or the pig's head. I thought every time I'd see the pig head, the actual head of a pig coming around, I'm like, I would flash back to 10th grade reading Lord of the Flies. Okay, I guess nobody's read Lord of the Flies but me. But it just was so, or so there'd be a monger with real dung. They probably picked it up over at horse tourney. Yeah, there's plenty of it there.
there are certain things that were just sort of automatic no's for me. I could admire those that did it from afar, but I was quite happy not to experience it directly.
Well, I like the mongers. They were an important part of the show, right? They were the first thing that people hit when they were coming in the morning. For the people who came in right at the gate, they saw the whole pre-show before they opened. So it was a good start for the patrons to learn that we were not just something to be watched, but something to be played with and interacted with. That they were being called my lord and my lady, no matter what they were wearing.
And also, they got the information that the Queen is coming today. It's Fair Day.
Lord Mayor was up there giving a speech, and a few other people, and then somebody would come running on horseback at breakneck speed, hell bent for leather, raising a cloud of dust behind him, and hi ho silver. The queen is coming. The queen cometh to the Shire this day. And get everybody riled up about, oh my God, the queen is coming. The queen is coming here to the Shire. Oh my God, it's better than Kanya. So that was the beginning of the whole thing, and the same people would be there at noon for main stage noon show, and it was a continuation of the same thing.
I think I've had other interviews with other people who were there at the beginning. And when Phyllis started the fair, historical reenactment was something you watched other people do, like at Colonial Williamsburg or the SCA. And Phyllis was clued into this theater movement around when the fair started, which was 1964-ish, that emphasized that everybody could be an actor. And the way Phyllis and Judy interpreted that was when they pulled people up, nobody could fail. It was just a genuine, everybody can play at this. And there are people doing fairs now where it's still the Queen is coming, it's Fair Day. And these are people who have never heard of Agora or Phyllis Patterson or the Living History Center. But somehow, and I know some of the shows that Mark and I have done have been done by other people. And I kind of like that. I kind of like the fact that it's become an oral tradition of its own.
I don't know if this is a non sequitur, but I think you mentioned Reduced Shakespeare. I ran into them again in 1999 in London. They were doing their show in London. I'm like, wow, you guys made it. Congrats. I think in Piccadilly Circus.
They are the poster children for fair performers and making it in the quote unquote real world.
Between them and Cock and Feathers with Sandy Grin, they kind of divided that they were better than anything I ever did. I mean, the audiences, their audiences would go wild. I just had people interested in Shakespeare, but those people, the people who went and saw them had a fun time. They laughed their asses off. They were the funniest stuff at Faire. I remember Reduced Shakespeare doing Hamlet backwards. That was fun. That their show was worth the whole going to Faire for. And I remember they did a night show that was memorable too. Somebody did a really good Pyramus and Thisbe that was hysterical in body. There was some cantaloupe boobs in there, and the Murder of Gonzago, directed by DJ Carlisle, who directed me in Faustus, was really funny too. Murder of Gonzago. They had one guy who was supposed to just all he had to do was walk out to the front of the stage and say, "Purpose is but the slave to memory," from Hamlet. And he was plowed. He walked out and made a huge sweeping gesture and said, "For a plug, if for a plug memory," and fell like on his face and had to be carried off. That was it.
And
That
Faire
yeah,
was the perfect place to do that.
I must say, as far as acting, I was professional. I was never drunk during any of my shows, and I never let that. I actually didn't drink a lot of alcohol at Fair like a lot of people did because I found it was just I couldn't pace myself. It just took too much out of me.
Did you, in trying to compete for an audience in a rich environment, did you have a favorite prop to make people watch you?
I had a cod piece that I put a squeaky toy in.
Well, that counts.
Yeah, so I would make amazing friends that way. I don't think they could do Fair in the early 80s today. I mean, they certainly could not do Drench a Wench the way they did back then. It was a lot, as strange as it sounds now, the 80s were a lot more innocent time. We keep saying that about every 20 years. I mean, in 1982, we were just starting to hear about AIDS. It was more of a East Coast thing at that point,
Hmm.
I believe, and just I hadn't even heard of it until there was an after hours party at a booth right across from main stage. I was just wandering around on some kind of substance, and I wandered back there, and they said that yeah, the booth owner, this is like his going away party because he's got AIDS, and I said, "What's that?" And they said, "Well, it stands for what they told me was actually wrong, and I discovered later it's acquired immune deficiency syndrome." And I said, "Okay, well, I'm driving an ambulance, and I hadn't even heard of that. I'm pretty hip on medical stuff." And that was the first night I ran into the guy. He looked very at peace. He was kind of gaunt. He was only about 33, but he was happy to be surrounded by all these people who loved him. It seemed like the best possible place for him to be.
Well, getting back to you on the streets at the Renaissance Fair, what else can you recall about your time there?
I used to get crap from Chris Zeta for going, along with some of the other Soaked Blokes, for going Italianate, which means with no slops. So you've just got your think Romeo and Juliet, the Franco Zeffirelli, like that, with just tights and a codpiece in front. And apparently that was not acceptable at the time. And she was going to pull my passes.
I really felt in a way sorry for Chris Seda because she had to basically run herd over 1,000 people who wanted to make their costume their own. So it was a job designed to make one short tempered.
Well, I heard her get hissed on main stage. She got up and people hissed at her. Ooh. She said, "I can hiss right back," and she did. But I was authentic in everything. I never, no, she never caught me wearing a watch or sunglasses or anything that I oughtn't to be during fair hours.
What else did you like about living in a 16th century Elizabethan village?
I liked that you could compliment people, and that was a very good way to start any kind of improv, is just simply to compliment something about what a lovely fan that is, milady, or sir, what a fine cut of your beard, or this or that or the other. And that was common to do in Elizabethan times. And now you just don't hear people on the street. If someone came up and complimented you, you'd be like, "What the hell, is this person on drugs?" And I grieve that we don't live in that society anymore, where we were so free and friendly with praise.
And it made other people very happy. I think that's one reason why they came back was they got a lot of positive strokes for just whoever they were.
Well, I'm sure it helped out the craftsmen, and they were such a crucial part of fair. Whenever I could, I would try to draw people up to whatever was being like in the area where the craftsmen were, the jewelers. Come see the find this or that for nothing, just for no reason, just to do it if nobody else was hawking for them.
I think Mark and myself would sometimes do that just for the pure joy of, because one thing we liked about the fair was that there was always a new crowd every, 2 minutes or 30 seconds or whatever, just as people walked around you. And you could just get into a routine of saying, buy a garland or whatever.
I never did pass the hat in any of my shows. I felt that, you know, even back in '82, it was not cheap to get into the fair, and then everything you bought to eat, and then all the crafts, and you could really fleece yourself by the time you finished a day of fair. So I felt like having my hand out again, just for giving the people the entertainment they've already paid for was too much.
I agree 100%. And Mark and I never passed the hat, and we never passed the hat for a show.
I never asked after someone took a picture of me with so and so. I never asked them for a dollar or some crap. And I understand there were some people like a pirate with a parrot or somebody who'd be like, "Well, Art, can I have a dollar or something?" I'm like, I just that seems so against the whole idea of fair. I don't think that should have been allowed.
Especially when the bird is the draw that people are getting their picture taken with.
I would love to see another kind of fair where they're trying to recreate a specific time period, like maybe Rome or any other time period that people especially like. But the Renaissance will always hold a special place in my heart just because it's the time of Shakespeare.
Have you done any Shakespeare lately?
Not lately. Let's see, what was the last one I did? King John in Boulder.
And did you play the title role?
Oh hell no, I was just Salisbury.
I don't remember who Salisbury is.
It's an obscure, at the time it was amazingly popular, and it's hard to understand because you read the play and it's just one of the most crap things that Shakespeare did. I guess it was just playing to what people wanted to hear.
And what was that?
I'm not sure what it was, but it was just there was really no. Usually, Shakespeare makes his main characters have a tragic flaw, but otherwise they're noble. But just there was really nothing noble about John. He was a jerk from the word go. So there's really no place to go with the characters. Kind of two dimensional.
And what was your character? And what was his contribution to the play?
Not much at all. Salisbury's just a few lines walking on, supporting King John, your king and mine, which is somehow always made sound like I was doing a game show. Here he is, your king and mine.
The
King
ever
John.
popular King John.
Give it up.
Yeah, that's a role you can have fun with. Well, I'm kind of running out of things to say, but when you were kind enough to say you were going to do an interview, was there any story that you said, I got to be sure to mention, and have we covered it? Or what is the story we haven't done that you want to talk about?
There really is no one story. I wrote about everything I could about Faire. Every memory I had only took about 26 pages. So there's not that much, but I included it in my one work, which I call Callisti. Faire changed my life forever. Nothing like it has ever happened before, I think, and nothing is likely to happen again. Not for man as we know it.
Okay, well then let me give you my traditional improv, and you've actually done this already. But imagine a world where there is the Phyllis Patterson Award for Achievement in Faire. The band has been told to sit on their hands, and you can take it as long as you like. But give me your acceptance speech for the Phyllis Patterson Achievement in Faire Award.
Um, I wouldn't accept such an award because everything I did at Faire, I did for fun. I didn't do it to educate anybody. God help the person who does that. Um, I was just there to have fun, and if some people got educated by the way I was having fun, that's fine. I didn't achieve anything. I mean, except having a real good time. But it elevated my whole spirit and changed my life and my view on everything.
Okay, well, I'll stop recording now. That was very well done. That was my October 2023 interview with Taliesin. If you have questions or comments you'd like me to forward to Taliesin, you can send them to me at djng@earthlink.net. Questions or comments about the podcast themselves can also be directed to me at djng@earthlink.net. And finally, if you or someone you know would like to be a guest on Fair Folk at Work, you can email me at djng@earthlink.net. But that's it for this time. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.